HLE Radio, the morning show. And we are live on our YouTube channel. Although I cannot see it. And, it's coming up, I guess. Anyway. It's funny looking. I'm funny looking. That's what it is. Listen. Let me tell you how crafty Satan is. I'll use this scripture, 1 Corinthians 14:33. And you probably know it by heart by now. For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all churches of the saints. The first part, there's a comma after confusion, right? For God is not the author of confusion. Good morning, Nate. I'm looking over here now. I got it. God is not the author of confusion. And which is what we would have had last night. Had we not. And that's the thing about walking with the Lord and being in tune. Now, Tuesday nights, first of all, Shelly Wilson's show started late. Like, it's supposed to start at 9. It started at 9:21. The system, for whatever reason. So I'm gonna replay it tonight. Again after the countdown. I'm gonna replay it again, just because I want to replay it. It did air last night. It just aired later, but I'm gonna replay it anyway. Excuse me. So, but Real Talk with Rick Smith comes on, and we had a new show. Now, Rick is real talk. Rick is real. Rick is honest. And Rick's been with us now, I guess, about 3 years. Thereabouts. Me the show. He says, Hunter, this one was, he said, I really laid it out. He said, go ahead and make sure and listen to it, And he said, I want to listen to this one. Community coffee. Good. It's good. I said, okay. So I listened to it, and it's good. But at the end, towards the end, he calls out my name, Brian's name, Dennis's name, and 2 other names, which I'm not going to say. Now, and a location, a physical location. Now, there's a situation with this radio station that if you've been listening before 2 years before this, which means you'd have to be listening 3 years or more, if you would have heard what he said, because there's more than one Hunter. There's more than one Brian. There's more than one Dennis. There's people named more than that. And the other 2 names, there's more than that. But there's only 50 states, right? So there's only one. There's only one Louisiana, right? There's only one Texas. There's only one state. Remember this, for God is not the author of confusion. So, unbeknown to Rick, Rick knows nothing. But because the names, the other two names that he calls out to go along with Hunter and Brian. Now he's called Hunter, he's referenced Hunter and Brian before in his program. He's done that many times in Real Talk. Not a problem. He's done that many times. I love Real Talk. I love Rick. He's real. But I don't talk to Rick every day. In fact, there's months go by I don't talk to Rick. So after hearing what he said, and hearing the names, the other two names, and the location, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Who has dredged all this stuff up? Because I put this to bed 2 years ago. God squashed this for me. Now, if the other people or the other person is still dealing with that, hey, I can't help it because I did what God said to do. I did it biblically. Now, and if these names came out, if I said the names this morning, you who have been listening for 3 years or more, you would know exactly. And if this would have aired last night, I'm telling you, it would have started a bunch of stuff. It would have started a bunch of stuff. It would have been chaos and confusion. So I'm like, who in the world? So I hit up Brian. I'm like, Brian. Brian said, I didn't say nothing. Well, I know Dennis ain't said nothing because Dennis, he ain't talked to him. I know better. So I've never talked to Rick about this situation. So if I've never talked to Rick about it, and if Brian says, no, I hadn't talked to him about it, and I've never specifically said names, excuse me, I've never specifically said names or locations on the radio. When I did talk about it, those times 3 years ago or before 2 years ago, when I was dealing with it, I never did specifically say a name or a location, although people did know, right? So if me or Brian didn't say nothing, that means somebody said something. So this was kind of gnawing at me, and I'm like, So I messaged Rick, and I said, hey, brother. Now this is just through text. I said, hey, man. I said, is this person that you're talking about, the name I'm not going to tell you, I said, is this the person on having to do with the radio? And he says, yes. And I'm like, how in the world? He said, well, I have a friend in that location. Okay. So the name that I'm not going to give you that would have been with this thing is in radio. And the friend is also in that location. Now, if it would have stayed right there, okay? If it would have stayed right there, here we go. There's still confusion, right? So at this point, at this point, I'm still thinking, okay, he has a friend, and this guy, who I've squashed this thing 2 years ago on my end. So if this guy still has a problem, and he's filled this friend with all kind of stuff, and this friend has filled Rick's here with all kind of stuff, I can't help that. So I'm going to let the show roll. Hey, I know I'm clear on my end. My heart is good. I'm not going to worry about it. And it just is what it is. I can't do nothing about it anyway. And that's how I knew that I was really delivered from that situation. Like that situation didn't bother me anymore. Because 2 years removed from it, I hadn't even thought about it. It hadn't even come across my mind. It really hadn't until that. It was that situation that brought it up, and I'm like, man, that's odd. But even when it got brought up, I didn't get mad. I didn't get nothing boiled up again. So I'm like, praise the Lord. For one, I'm delivered from that, and it doesn't bother me anymore. Number two, I can let it lie. Right? Remember, God is not the author of confusion. That's Satan's book. He writes that book. God doesn't write that book. So, I'm done. Like, it is what it is. Rick gives me a call. Now we're talking face to face. Now we're talking, voice to voice. Come to find out, right? After we're talking, the guy, the name, he is in radio, but not the same radio that I'm thinking of. He just happens to have the same name, but it's a different part of radio. It's a different friend. So while I'm thinking it's the guy or the issue, while I'm thinking it's that name, it's not. It's a different name. I mean, it's the same name, but it's a different guy. So while I'm thinking that it's that situation, again, he knew nothing about that situation. It's a totally different situation. Do you see how crafty Satan is? Do you see how it could have got out of hand? Do you see how that could have looped into so much crap? That is why we have to put on the whole armor of God every day. That is why we have to walk with the Lord and be in tune with Him. Two people with the same name who happen to be in the same field of radio, but two different forms of radio in the same location. One was visiting the location, one is in the location. One had nothing to do with the other. Right? That is how sneaky Satan is. That's why he goes about looking to steal, kill, and destroy. Listen, by the time we got finished talking, we decided to run a replay again. And said, Hunter, let's go ahead. I'll redo the show and I'll take that portion out because the show is great. The content of the show, it's good. It's really good. It really is good. And it's something people need to hear. But he's going to remove that part out of it so it doesn't cause confusion. Because once I told him, and I didn't go into detail, once I explained how that could be perceived by some of the listeners and everything, and how that could open up, what it could open up, and people could perceive that to be something that it's not. It was like, no, we're not going to give Satan that chance. And then we prayed together. By the end of the phone call. I can imagine Satan was not too happy. And that's fine with me. But you have to always be on guard. I just want to give you that example this morning. Because that is something, 2 years. 2 years, right? 2 years, that thing is squashed. I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't thought about that situation. I literally was done with. I mean, I moved on. That thing hasn't. That thing hasn't bothered me or hasn't. And then coming up again, it hadn't. I'm like, okay, I'll just leave it as it lies, because I know I'm good. But I knew for some folks, people were going to start questioning. People were going to start wondering. For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. So if you're dealing with confusion today, if you're confused, if you're like really confused, it's not God. If you're really confused this morning, stop. If you're in a state of confusion and you don't know what to do next, you're just really confused right now. I'm being serious. If you are really in a state of confusion right now, stop. Just stop. Stop and take a look at the situation around you. Look at the situations for what they are and see if there's a miscommunication or if something was perceived wrong. Because just from something being perceived wrong, something as simple as that. Rick didn't know anything. Rick had no clue. Rick didn't know anything. He was as innocent as could be. It was totally something different, but Satan twisted that around to make it look like it was something that it wasn't. And he twisted that around. If that would have got out, I would have been done. I would have been all right with it. But how hard would it have been for me to convince people that I was all right with it? I would have looked like I wasn't all right with it because I would have been trying to convince people that I was all right with it. And I would have been having to go through stuff that I've already been through. And it would have started all kind of crap again. And you know what that would have done? That would have delayed what we're doing today. Because the vision, the number one thing for HLE Radio this year, the goal is souls. We're out to reach the lost. The goal is souls. So if Satan has me tied up dealing with stuff that has already been dealt with, and all this stupidity of stuff that's coming right back around in this little crap that don't matter, that's a trick of Satan, you see? And when you can start recognizing that stuff before it even starts, you can stay focused and you can stay on point of what God has you to do. And what God has HLE Radio to do this year is reach the lost. More than anything, that's the goal. The goal is souls. That's all we're about. The goal is souls. So if you're at a point of confusion this morning, stop. Just stop. Stop, take a deep breath, and look. Just look at your surroundings. Look at your surroundings. Look at the situations that you're in and say, what got off track here? What did Satan craft here that I let get by me? You might find something that you can clear up and go on and get right back on track. The morning show continuing on HLE Radio, your home for Christian country music. I love you this morning. Be encouraged. God is on your side.